Hey guys, Kevin Yates here. So I got another question from, this one was from Jeff, and I didn't print it out with me, but it was pretty straightforward to the point. So Jeff, you had a question about pain that you said you had in the top of your shoulder, and I wasn't completely clear with where you were talking about exactly where it was. So let's go through a couple things. You had pain in the top of the shoulder. You've had it for about 6 months, you said, and it started to affect what you can do. So you've moved from like flat benching into dumbbells, and actually dumbbells are a pretty good option for pressing. But anyway, so I wasn't really clear. So let's address a little bit about what might be going on in the first place. So, there's all kinds of different shoulder injuries and things that can happen. The first and foremost thing that I would do, Jeff, is go get it checked out. I'd be a little bit concerned that it's been going on 6 months. So, being that it's been going on that long, you just want to make sure that there's nothing more serious going on. Sometimes it could be a serious thing. Other times it's like nagging stuff that it's not serious yet, and eventually it will get serious if it's not addressed. But it's just kind of that pain that, like, whenever you work out, it's there. If it's there when you work out, but it's gone within, right when you're done working out or within a day or something like that, and it disappears and it doesn't come back till you work out, it's probably nothing too serious. It's probably more a case of muscle imbalances and some stress that your shoulder's taking. But again, I am not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be one, so I would just get it checked out. But just to give you some ideas, typically a couple of common shoulder issues are AC joint injuries and rotator cuff injuries, particularly to the supraspinatus. So if you have your pain, if it's kind of like right in this area a little bit, it's kind of like top of the shoulder, but it's right under the acromion, your top of your shoulder blade there. If it feels like it's kind of like right under there, that's typically the supraspinatus. So it's one of the rotator cuff muscles. It's an issue with that. If you try to reach overhead and it bugs you, that's usually a pretty good indicator that you have some irritation there. The other one is more located toward the front. So if you felt in between the bone here, the acromion, and your clavicle, right in between the two is your acromioclavicular joint. So AC joint. Typically, if you were to like reach for, scratch your other shoulder or reach across your body, you'd feel some irritation and pain going on in there. So those are two of the common ones. When you said top of the shoulder, that's what came to mind for me. Again, keep in mind that you're not here and I'm not able to see what's going on and do like a formal assessment or anything. So just for the sake of the video, I'm doing the best I can with the information that I've got. So with that being the case, then first thing I would look at is flexibility. What kind of range of motion do you have at your shoulder? Like I talked about before, can you reach up overhead without any real problems? Are you okay across the body? What does it look like when you're doing your pressing patterns? Are you able to get a full range of motion, all the way back? Are you having to stop midway because of inflexibility? Maybe it's not just pain. Maybe you just, is there not mobility? I'm not quite sure. So the first thing I want to do is make sure you have really good mobility, good healthy mobility in the shoulder. So if you have good mobility and there's pain going on, you kind of have one of the areas addressed. You got mobility, so it might be a question of just addressing the muscle imbalances that you've got. Okay, the other thing, when we talk about addressing mobility, most people think stretching, right? So they think, oh yeah, I do, in the doorway and kind of do pec stretches or, on a wall, things like that, which are a good start. But the problem is if we're only doing stretching, and we're neglecting the strengthening component. So muscles that get unbalanced, particularly with shoulder injuries, tend to be like the pectoralis muscles, the anterior muscles of the shoulders, even to a degree the upper traps. You want to be looking at your posture. Do you have classically a forward kind of rounded, stooped, posture here? Those are symbolic that you might have a little overdevelopment or tightness, dominance going in the anterior muscles, and some weakness going in the upper and mid back muscles, particularly the ones that stabilize your shoulder blades. We'll talk about those in a minute. So again, if we just stretch, we kind of create all this room in these muscles to open up the joint, but if we forget the strengthening component, there's nothing really to hold it in place. So usually it just kind of creates some temporary quote unquote room in the joint, and then it just goes right back to where it was. So what we want to do is some strengthening movements. Now, you're probably fully aware, as most people are, about how to do a row. There's no secret to do some pulling exercises will help to open everything up and strengthen the muscles of the scapular stabilizers. The thing that I see, some of the big mistakes are not so much in doing the exercises, but how the exercises are done. And a lot of times our eyes can play tricks on us, because you can watch somebody do an exercise like a row, and visually it might look like they're doing everything right. But one of the biggest mistakes or things that we're a lot of times assuming, especially like rehabilitation programs, they're assuming that as long as we do an exercise, we're automatically targeting the right muscles. And it's not always true. And especially if you have muscle imbalances where certain muscles, stronger muscles, are taking over and compensating for weaker ones, you can do the best exercise, to try and correct it. But if the compensation strategies are strong enough, the muscles we're trying to get are going to be inhibited, and the strong muscles are just going to take over anyway. So you can actually compound the problem even though you're doing a quote-unquote correct exercise. So what we're looking at is addressing the scapular stabilizers, and I'll talk about what I was getting into with the row, so bear with me if I seem like I'm jumping all over the place here. But the reason why these are important is because these are really the foundation. So you'll also see in a lot of rehab programs, they focus a lot with shoulder injuries on rotator cuff exercises. So doing a lot of like TheraBand kind of internal external rotations, and flexion, extension, isometrics, things like that they'll work on. The problem with it is that if you aren't addressing the muscles that stabilize your shoulder blade, you can do all the rotator cuff muscles in the world, exercises for them, and it's not going to do a whole lot of good, because the foundation that the rotator cuff muscles, they attach to your shoulder blade. So if your shoulder blade's unstable, those muscles are actually going to be unstable. So all the strengthening exercises in the world aren't going to do a whole lot for it. So what we want to do first and foremost is get this foundation guy, this shoulder blade, as stable as we can, so that everything else, the rotator cuff muscles, then can work from a stable foundation, right? When you have stability, you're going to have stability of the scapula, you have more stability of your shoulder, and if you have more stability, you're going to have more strength, right? So getting back into one of the mistakes, some of the mistakes with like pulling patterns like rows are that I've seen most people pull from what I call front to back. They do front to back pulling, and it's not in the motion front to back, it's in the sequencing of the exercise. So what I'm talking about is that they'll pull first with like the hands and the wrists, then they pull with the arms. So it's almost like they're pulling with the flexors of the forearm, then the biceps are doing a lot, then the shoulders come into play, and even the upper traps and levator scapula come, so they kind of, especially when they fatigue, they end up kind of up here bunched up and doing all these weird kind of looking rowing patterns, right? So instead of doing that, what you want to make sure you do is you want to pull from back to front. So you want to initiate with the shoulder blades, then follow through with the arms and the hands. So that's the big thing. The other thing is making sure that you're training in different ranges, right? Because we don't just pull from here to here all the time. It's not just like pulling from chest height and straight back. Sometimes we're grabbing things down below and having to pull up, right? Sometimes we're reaching and taking things from up and pulling down. Okay, so there's different ranges of pulling patterns that we want to make sure that we're stable within. Because the shoulder is a funny thing. We have so much range of motion or potential for range of motion. It's a highly mobile joint, but what we have in mobility, we lack in stability. So it's not a very stable joint. So we have to work pretty hard to keep it stable, and that's why it's one of the most often injured joints. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. So range of motion, make sure that you have good range of motion at the shoulder. Make sure that you're including strengthening exercises, and in particular the rowing exercises. Make sure you're pulling from back to front, okay, and keeping a good balance as well. So I don't know how much pushing type movements you do compared to pulling movements, but I would assess that in your program as well, because a lot of times people tend to be very push dominant. So there's a lot of bench pressing, there's a lot of overhead shoulder pressing, there's a lot of like push-ups, there's a lot of dips, tricep press down. So all these pushing patterns, and typically it's not balanced out enough with the pulling patterns. And the pulling patterns that we do, again, there's typically that front to back pulling style. So even though most people include them, a lot of times they're not getting to the right muscles back there. So it just further exacerbates the problem, makes it worse. Okay. So Jeff, I know this was just a few tips, and hopefully this was enough to give you some ideas and get you started in the right direction. Again, I'm just working with as best I can the information I had. So do me a favor and let me know how it goes for you. But definitely get that shoulder checked out, and go get it looked at. Go get a medical diagnosis on it, just to rule anything more serious out. And hopefully that'll help you out. All right. So anybody, if you have questions or comments, do me a favor and go ahead and post them right here, and let me know all about them. And again, if you have anything else that you'd like me to do a future video on, feel free to let me know. And until next time, this is Kevin Yates. You take care and have a great day.